Yes, he does.
You didn't bring your stick again? You don't allow it? You think you've hurt somebody? Yeah, I know he drags the ball. He hits you.
I don't want him tripping anybody else.
Very bad. Yeah. I've noticed how you sort of drag it along behind you, and then when you make a turn, it's sticking out there. Straight up the side. Yeah. Get over the chair. Get over the chair now. Line yourself up. Maybe give you a push. Good job. Arkansas on this one. Okay, perfect.
Yes, it is. We'll see you.
That's just the right time.
We'll say bye.
Football was over for us. But you got a new coach. Yeah. You stole the one from me. Stole the one from me. Yeah. Okay. You have to sit on the front. All right, it's time for us to begin tonight. If you are using your workbooks, we'll be in lesson 8. If you're using the book, we'll be in chapters 1 through the very first verse of chapter 5 in 2 Chronicles. I've asked Philip Dees to lead us in prayer to begin our class. So, Philip, if you will.
Yes. Well, Father in heaven, we're so thankful we were able to be here tonight, Wednesday night, to study your word. We're thankful for the warm weather outside and the warm weather this week. We're thankful that we're able to be here. We're thankful for each member of our class, each member of our congregation. Pray that you would open up our hearts to your word and with our children, help their hearts to be open and them to have a desire to want to serve and please you, and help us to have that same desire. We're thankful that you have preserved the Old Testament for us, that we can learn how you deal with your people in the Old Testament, and specifically for the Chronicles of the Kings and for the book of Samuel, the other Old Testament books that tell us about David and many other kings and people. Please be with our study tonight. Be with each one of us in the class to listen and participate, and be with John as he directs our study. Be with all the other class teachers. Keep us safe. Be with those of our congregation that are struggling and need your prayers. And help us to have a good study tonight. Thank you for your son, Jesus. And we pray that we can be with you in heaven. In Christ's name, amen.
Amen. Thank you, Philip. All right. This is our first lesson in 2 Chronicles. So up until now, we've been in 1 Chronicles. The 1 Chronicles is basically 9 chapters of genealogies, followed by 20 chapters on the reign of David. And then on Sunday, Gary led us through an overview of the life of David and the character of David. And so we're ready now to begin the study of the next king, which will be his son Solomon. David, at the end of 1 Chronicles, had prepared his son for leadership and instructions. He had prepared him to build a temple. He had the site, he had the materials, he had the plans that he had gotten from God. And so he had prepared his son, he had prepared the people, he had prepared the nation to go on after him. And then he dies. We have the record of David's death right at the end of 1 Chronicles. So I want to ask the question of you tonight, was Solomon a good king? In the kids' classes, if you go into kids' classes when they're studying kings, they'll have a list of the kings, and each one of them will be a smiley face or a frowny face. The smiley face kings are the good kings, and the frowny face kings are the bad kings. So was Solomon a good king? If you go into kids' classes, which will he be? He'll be smiling. He'll be a smiley face king. But is he a good king in your thoughts and your ideas?
I wouldn't call him a good man.
Wouldn't call him a good man?
Yeah, with all his philandering.
Yeah, he had a few personal issues, didn't he? Philip, what were you going to say?
He wasn't perfect by any stretch.
As are none of us.
This is a classic John Sly book.
Yes and no. Is that your answer?
That's correct.
A wise man that wasn't wise.
That may be a classic question of mine, but that's a classic answer of yours. Gary?
I think it's interesting that he followed God with his heart. And I mean, he everything was about serving God and doing what God wanted and being right. And it was negative influences later in his life that led him away from that same that fire for God, to be right, to serve God with all his heart. And then, of course, we see at the end of I have to know the book now. The other book that he wrote, it's Vanity of Vanities, all the vanity. He had so much.
Ecclesiastes, yeah.
Ecclesiastes. I don't know why I couldn't think of that. But he sees that all those things were worthless, and he ends it by saying, "Fear God and keep His commandments." And so he has this roundabout, but he has that period of time where he was led away from God.
So it really depends on when during his life you look at Solomon, doesn't it? And Kathy's answer was probably mid to late in his life. And what we're going to study tonight in these chapters in Chronicles is early in his life and in his reign, so that we're going to get a good picture of Solomon. And what was Solomon known for? Wisdom, women, wealth, all those W's. The nation prospered during the reign of Solomon and was at its greatest extent geographically during the reign of Solomon, and generally was a peaceful reign, although later in his reign there were some enemies that God had raised up, including some from within, so that Solomon had some issues at the end of his reign, but it was his own doing. I want you to look at or listen. I'm going to turn over to Deuteronomy chapter 17. And I want to read you here. Of course, this is before Israel ever had a king. But God had, in his foresight, knew that there would be kings in Israel. And so he gives some instructions here through Moses in Deuteronomy chapter 17 and verse 14. Moses is speaking. He says, "When you come to the land that the Lord your God is giving you, and you possess it and dwell in it, and then say, I will set a king over me, like all the nations that are around me. You may indeed set a king over you, whom the Lord your God will choose. One from among your brothers you shall set as king over you. You may not put a foreigner over you who is not your brother. Only he must not acquire many horses for himself, or cause the people to return to Egypt in order to acquire many horses, since the Lord has said to you, you shall never return that way again. And he shall not acquire many wives for himself, lest his heart turn away. And he shall not acquire for himself excessive silver and gold." So those are the three requirements of the kings that the Lord set. Not many horses, not many wives, not excessive silver and gold. So how did Solomon measure up there? Not very good. Not very good, because he did all of those. We're going to read about some of those here in 2 Chronicles. But God had set these, and he goes on to say in the verses after this that the king must also write a book of the laws of God and have it by him, so that he knows God's commandments. And I don't think the kings in general did a very good job of that. So Solomon, as I think Philip said, was a man, just like we are. He had strengths and he had weaknesses. He had faults. He sinned. His sins brought consequences, just like us. So Solomon was a good man, a great king, but with some issues and some problems. So let's dynasty of David, since he's the second one in the dynasty. And then question 2 asks, describe the condition of worship at the beginning of Solomon's reign. Where have they come to worship? Gibeon. And why have they come there? That's where the tabernacle is. But what's missing from the tabernacle? The ark is in Jerusalem, in a tent that David built for it. So they've come to Gibeon to offer sacrifices because the altar of burnt offering is in Gibeon, where the tabernacle is. And why was this the situation? Why was the ark separated from the tabernacle? Why was the ark in Jerusalem? David took it there, I believe, in preparation for building the temple, but still, the proper place for the ark would have been with the tabernacle in Gibeon. But, and remember, we talked about this, we talked about there being 2 priests, one in Gibeon, one in Jerusalem, where the ark was.
Do we have any idea how long it was there in Jerusalem?
I don't know. It would have been a couple of years or so, but it had been separated from the tabernacle for much longer than that, because you remember that the ark was lost to the Philistines, and then it caused problems for them. They sent it back, and it stayed in I can't think of the name of the place now, but it stayed there for many years until David then brought it to Jerusalem. So it hadn't been in Jerusalem all that terribly long, but it had been in the previous location for quite a long time. All right, question 3. What did God offer to Solomon in the vision at Gibeon? All right, he said, what the English Standard Version says is, ask what I shall give you. Was this a test, do you think? Yes, Kathy says she thinks it's a test. Was God testing Solomon?
I mean, it may not so much have been a test as just the response would be different based on the answer.
The blessings might be different based on the answer. Solomon was there at Gibeon and was worshiping God. And he was worshiping God in a grand way because they sacrificed a lot of animals at this time, and he had the leaders of Israel there, also demonstrating to them that he was going to worship God. And God comes to Solomon in a vision and said, ask what I shall give you. It is probably a sort of a test. And then verse number 4 says, what did Solomon ask for? Yeah. What kind of wisdom specifically did he ask for? To govern the people. He said that this is a great people that you have placed me over, and they are the people of God. And so what he wanted was wisdom to govern the people. And was God pleased with Solomon's request?
Yes.
Yes, he was. So question 5 asks, why did God give Solomon more than he requested?
His heart was in the right place.
All right. His heart was in the right place, and we know that because of what his request was. He didn't make a selfish request. He didn't request anything for him personally. He requested wisdom to govern the nation. And what did God tell him as a result of that.
Get riches, long life, and honor.
Right. Verse 11, God answered Solomon, because this was in your heart, and you have not asked possessions, wealth, honor, or the life of those who hate you, and have not even asked long life, but asked wisdom and knowledge for yourself, that you may govern my people over whom I have made you king, then wisdom and knowledge are granted to you. I will also give you riches, possessions, and honor, such as none of the kings who were before you, and none after you shall have the like. So God says to Solomon that you're going to be a king unlike any king that Israel ever had or ever will have. Because what's going to happen to the kingdom after Solomon's reign? It's going to divide into two kingdoms, the northern and southern kingdom, and which would be the smaller of those two? The southern kingdom, over which the line of David would continue to reign. So God says to Solomon and commends him for his choice, and says he's going to make him great anyway, even though he hadn't asked for that. And he's going to bless him. Well, that's a good question, and we're not told how old he was. But I would presume, just for the general lay of things here, David was king in Jerusalem for 33 years, and Solomon was born in Jerusalem. So that Solomon would probably be in his late 20s or early 30s at this time. Probably. He could have been in his mid-20s, but he would have been in that age range.
Unusual request for a young man.
Well, I think what we see here partly is David's preparation of Solomon, because he had designated Solomon as the king, and I think had prepared him not only to lead, but to build the temple and to lead the people. And Solomon may have had some just innate wisdom himself too. All right, question 6. What business ties did Solomon have to Egypt and Q? I have a map here I want to show you. It's not a very good map. It's hard to see. If you're sitting in the back, you won't be able to see it at all. But this shows some of Solomon's trading connections. Here's Israel here in the middle. And what we're told when we combine the accounts from Kings and from Chronicles, that he had trade routes that went to Tarshish, which we believe Tarshish was over in Spain on the far west end of the Mediterranean. And that there they got silver and apes and peacocks and ivory and all sorts of things. All right?
Apes or grapes?
Huh?
Apes or grapes?
Apes.
Okay.
Yeah. Apparently there were apes in Spain, or there were apes in Europe at that time. And from Egypt, he got horses and chariots, and then resold them up here to Q, which in your Bibles it may be QUE, and here it's Q. He sold chariots to the car, and Sheba maybe was there. That's why there's a question mark. And then they talk about the gold of Ophir. So Solomon conducted a trading empire as well as a political and military entity, and he traded with a lot of different people in the Mediterranean area and even here. It is possible that Ophir, which they show here across the Red Sea in Eastern Africa, may be a place that's even farther east. So we don't know exactly where it is.
Unbelievably wealthy.
He was what?
Unbelievably wealthy.
Unbelievably wealthy. Just the materials that went into the temple itself were billions, in our dollars today would be billions and billions of dollars, maybe even trillions of dollars. So David, of course, had amassed much of that, but Solomon, both through tribute and through trade, amassed a great fortune for himself and for the country also. So he was a very rich guy. All right, number 7 says, how many men worked in building the temple?
It's like 153,000.
Did you add that yourself, or did you just read what the book says?
I added 70 and 80 and 3,000.
153,600. And where did those come from? Yeah, look at verse 17 of chapter 1. I'm sorry, chapter 2. Verse 17 of chapter 2 says, Then Solomon counted all the resident aliens who were in the land of Israel after the census of them that David his father has taken, and were found to be 153,600. So these are the people that he put to work building the temple. And who are these people?
Foreigners.
Yeah, they're foreigners that are still in the land. This is another indication that the Jews never really did the job of pushing all the people out of the land that they should have. There were, yeah, and so these were pressed into labor. They did use the people of the land for service. Back further in Samuel and in Kings, it talks about them being wood carriers and water carriers and wood cutters. So they impressed them into service. Kings also says that Solomon impressed Israelites into service to help cut that timber that they were cutting over in the forest in Lebanon. 30,000 at a time, and they worked, I think, a month at a time, and he rotated them. So he not only impressed the people of the land, he also impressed Israelites itself. You remember, or you probably know, that when his son Rehoboam took the throne, what did the people request of Rehoboam?
Lighten their load.
Lighten the load that Solomon had imposed on them. And so that load is both a labor load and a wealth load to furnish his
Just a little aside. We sit here and read this and talk about how hard they work and everything. But this is one of the things we were fortunate enough to get to see all of this. And just looking at the pyramids and the structures, it really got to me because they did all that by hand.
manual labor.
So it would have taken 156,000 people because they would have died. A lot would die building these. They got stones on them,
Yeah.
And it was, we can't imagine.
The death rate might not be as high as we imagine because, they didn't want people to die. Some of these were highly trained people for, particularly masons, for cutting the blocks and then building those. If you remember when, I think Samuel or Kings tells us that when they built the temple, there was not the sound of a hammer in the city.
They didn't have a lift.
No. Well, they had invented things to help them lift, but
it wasn't what we had.
Yeah, it wasn't what we have. It wasn't like hiring a crane from down the street and bringing him up and hiking it up. So, yes, it was hard, laborious work. It took Solomon about 7 years to complete the temple. And the temple is not a huge building. It's a grand building, but it's not huge. We'll talk about in a moment about how big the temple was.
They use water a lot to float stuff.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, we'll talk about that too. A lot of the wood, they didn't have a lot of wood in Israel, so the forests of Lebanon, the so-called cedars of Lebanon, yeah, they would cut those and take them down to the sea and bring them to Joppa, which was a Judean or Israel seaport, and then they would bring these huge logs. These would be like cypress and redwood trees is what they were cutting. So it'd be a lot of work and a lot of business to do. What was Solomon's view of the temple? Question 8 asked. And he refers you to verses 4 to 6 of chapter 2.
Basically, that it couldn't contain God, nor could the heavens.
Okay. Did Solomon think God was going to live in the temple? That does not seem to be his view. What he seems to think is, and I think his view is correct, that this is a house for the name of the Lord. Why was the temple so grand? Because it was going to be a signal to people around that the God of Israel is a great God. So that this temple, for his name, is going to be a great temple. Let's read verses 4 through 6 of 2 Chronicles chapter 2. Peggy, would you read that, please?
Ask me one more time, because my sister was just trying to get a hold of me.
Okay. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Chapter 2, verses 4 through 6. This is Solomon speaking about the temple.
Now I am building a temple for the name of the Lord my God, in order to dedicate it for him, for burning fragrant incense before him, for displaying the rows of the bread of the presence continually, and for sacrificing burnt offerings for the morning and the evening, the Sabbaths and the new moons, and the appointed festivals of the Lord our God. This is ordained for Israel permanently. The temple that I am building will be great, for our God is greater than any of the gods. But who is able to build a temple for him, since even heaven and the highest heaven cannot contain him? Who am I then, that I should build a temple for him, except as a place to burn incense before him?
Okay. So Solomon's view of the temple was that this was going to be a building that proclaimed the greatness of God to both his people and to other people, and it was going to be a place where God was to be worshipped, not a place where God was going to live. So we call it the house of God sometimes, and that's a good, that the Bible also calls it that, but it's the house for God and for God's name, for God's glory. And that's the way Solomon viewed it. Matthew?
Kind of a sidebar question.
Okay.
Might sound dumb.
There's no dumb questions. They say just dumb answers.
So in 5, for our God is greater than all gods, and also the commandments, have no other gods before me. Are there other gods? Or is that?
And big G and little g.
Yeah, the big G and little g. There are other gods, but not true gods. There are many gods in the nations surrounding Israel. And so what is Solomon saying? That this God, whom we worship, is greater than all gods. Yeah, little g. And it may even, you can even read this to say that our God, the true God, is greater than all other gods put together. The sum total of all other gods. But there were other gods that people worshipped, just as there are other gods that people worship today. But not the true God.
No, I got that. I'm just, are there other higher things that are not God?
Other higher things?
Yeah.
As man regards it, yes. Man regards other gods that are higher than man. But God, through the commandments, and you are quoting "you'll have no other gods before me," through God is the God.
I think that the people chose gods to worship and created gods, but as far as being actual gods that created something, there are no gods. There are only God.
Yeah.
Because God created everything, but man created these other deities to worship.
Well, they're not deities; they're just objects of worship.
Right, and they put deity on it.
Yeah.
Whether it's Diana, goddess Diana, or Zeus, or whatever they choose, man assigned that value.
Yeah.
Value.
Yeah, man has chosen other objects to worship as other than the true God, the living God, the God, creator God, the God of all gods. So, all right, Justin, just for your, I'm not going to ask question 9, but we're going to talk a little bit about question 9. What do we know about Tyre and Hiram? Tell me about Hiram. What do you know about him?
Hiram was the man that was really good at dealing with the cedars. He was a craftsman. He had the ability to take care of that situation of getting those cedars down to Java.
Okay.
And so
Yeah. This Hiram, and there's a little bit of confusion because Hiram, this is Hiram, the king of Tyre, and then there is a craftsman by the name of Huram Abi, and actually that name and this name are the same name. It's just that there are no vowels in the Hebrew, so that the vowels that we have are supplied to help us pronounce things. So that sometimes it's supplied with an I, sometimes with a U. But this Hiram is the king of Tyre.
Oh, I see a little mark.
So who is Hiram?
Huram Abi?
Yeah.
Huram Abi is a craftsman. We'll talk about him in just a minute because the next question's about him, number 10. So we'll talk about him. But this Hiram is the king of Tyre. What do we know about him?
So he's the one that provided cedars and craftsmen.
To who?
To Solomon.
And to David. All right. So David had a relationship with this Hiram, who was the king of Tyre, and Tyre controlled the cedars of Lebanon, basically, or some of them, and they were known as excellent woodmen, lumberjacks, so that they cut down the trees and floated them down, and David used Hiram and to build his palace, and then Solomon continued the association with Hiram to supply wood for the temple and for his own palace. Now, David had already built a palace. This is just a sort of a what do you think question. Why did Solomon need another palace?
Bigger. Wise.
Bigger, because he had lots of wives. Yeah, he had lots of wives. So he needed more room than David needed in his palace. What do we know about Tyre? Tyre was
Shipping port.
a what?
A shipping port.
A shipping port right on the Mediterranean. It was a Phoenician city, had been founded by the Phoenicians, and it was a great trade. As a matter of fact, some of that trade that we saw on the map before was conducted in conjunction with Tyrians, the people of Tyre, that Solomon was engaging in. He was using their ships and making agreements with them. And but Tyre was originally one of the places that the Israelites were to wipe away, because it was in the tribal assignment of Asher. But apparently they never did do away with Tyre, so it existed into even New Testament times, and it was a very powerful city-state because of its trade. And the interesting thing is this Hiram was the king for many years, and when he died, a guy by the name of Ethbaal, who wasn't in Hiram's family, he was another dynasty, took over as the king of Sidon and Tyre, and he had a very famous daughter by the name of Jezebel, who married Ahab, one of the kings of the northern kingdom, the king of Israel, and of course has a really bad reputation. So, and what did Solomon give Hiram for all this wood that he was supplying?
Sweet, barley wine.
Yeah, food and drinks. And for many years, the Chronicles doesn't specify that, But if you look over in Kings, it talks about Solomon giving him this year by year. So for a number of years, he gave these foodstuffs. So they traded food for wood for the temple and the palace that Solomon was building.
I think it's interesting because whenever he, the king says, great is the God, and yes, we'll be happy to do that. I mean, he was really supportive because even he believed in this God.
Yes, and that's because I think of his association with David and then his knowledge of Solomon. If you remember, when Solomon made the request to him, he responded with something like, I'm so glad David has such a wise son to conduct himself in this way and to make these alliances with people around him. All right, who was the skilled craftsman sent to Solomon, and where was his family from? This is Huram-Abi. His father was where? From where? Tyre. And his mother
The daughters of Dan.
was from Dan, although I think Kings tells us that she was of the tribe of Naphtali, as Philip is saying there. So she lived in Dan, or came from Dan, but she was of a tribe of Naphtali. So this man that was sent by Hiram, king of Tyre, to Solomon was a part Tyrian and part Israelite. So, and he was a very accomplished man, very skilled. If you remember when they built the tabernacle, God actually inspired some craftsmen in the building of the tabernacle. And we're not told that about Huram-Abi, but he's obviously a guy that has a lot of skills. And maybe some of those skills were endowed to him by God. All right. Question 11 says, where was the temple constructed?
Mount Moriah.
Mount Moriah, which is one of the mountains in the city of Jerusalem. And where did we see this site before?
Threshing floor of Ornan.
The threshing floor of Ornan. And what's important about that?
What God called an end to the.
Yeah, when David performed the census for his own purposes and not for God's, God gave him the choice, you remember, of his punishment, and he chose to be in the hand of God for 3 days. And God sent a destroying angel basically through the nation of Israel. 70,000 people died, and David saw this angel as he was approaching or coming to Jerusalem on the threshing floor of Ornan. And it's there that God stopped and said enough. And so David bought this site from Ornan, the Jebusite. And so that was where the temple was going to be built, where David had seen this destroying angel. So it's a very important site.
Isn't that also where Abraham took Isaac to?
Where Abraham what?
Took Isaac to.
Took Isaac? Yes. Mount Moriah was where Abraham took Isaac to sacrifice Isaac. So, important site. And you'll notice that throughout the Bible that these things will come up from time to time. So pay attention to them.
So on the Tyre, and just a side note, I was kind of looking back at Tyre and Sidon, that it was interesting to me that Jesus traveled that area, the Gentile area, and it's kind of in that area where he healed the daughter of the Canaanite, or Syrophoenician woman.
Yes.
And then there was an early church kind of established in Tyre also.
Yeah. Yeah, it was, during New Testament times, it was a place that Jesus did go.
And Paul.
All right, question 12 says, when did construction begin?
Second day of the second month of the 4th year of his reign.
All right, Solomon had been king for 4 years before he started building. But did he wait too late? What do you think? Should he have started earlier?
Sometimes you gotta gather your thoughts.
Yeah. Well, it got other things to gather too, because he had to organize all this labor. He had to get the materials, and there's no criticism for starting at this time. So it was the 4th year of his reign, early in the 4th year of his reign when he started. And as I said before, it took him about 7 years to complete the temple.
I had a thought as well. So
Just
how
one?
long ago was, just one. How long ago was it that David fought Goliath?
You mean from the
Yeah.
Solomon's reign?
Well, so that whole experience. So there would have still been giants existing at that time that may or may not have been in the region. Now
Yeah.
that they could have been utilized for a lot of the buildings.
Okay, so that's the solution to not having equipment. You have
I'm
giants.
just thinking, you got cranes.
There probably were, and it might require another study to really determine what we think these giants were. They were men taller than normal,
Right.
but not like we think of mythical giants, maybe. I mean, Goliath himself was
9'6" pretty mythical.
8 or 9 feet tall. Yeah.
I'm just like,
All right. So, 4th year, that probably, at that day and time, that would have been pretty quick in his reign. He would have had to consolidate his reign. He would have to organize things. He already had a lot of material and the plans, but he's not criticized anywhere for beginning at that time. That's probably pretty early. All right. So my question is, what do you think the temple looked like?
birdie. Golden.
Golden on the inside. On the inside. All right, I have some representations here that people have come up with, and that's what somebody's view of it. A lot of white on the outside, the two massive columns, bronze columns on the front. This is the bronze sea with the bulls. You remember the description? 3 bulls facing in each of the 4 directions. The altar here, and inside, everything is covered with gold. The floor, the walls, the ceiling, everything is covered with gold.
That was the one thing I came across too. It mentioned that the ceiling was covered in fur, and then said it was lined with gold.
Yes.
So how do you do that?
Well, the columns or the beams that support the ceiling are wood, but then they've overlaid the wood with gold, so that when you walk in, of course you and I wouldn't be able to walk in, but when you walk in, everything you see is gold.
Everything's gold, then they threw fur up on top just for aesthetics.
Well, no, the
Fur is the
ceiling,
wood.
the ceiling is supported.
Fur is in the fur. It's
Fur,
like a
wood. Not F-U-R, F-I. No.
I know, I had this picture of
Thinking about Grace.
You're thinking of the jungle room.
Oh, yeah.
And Grace.
How far away was it?
That's good.
All right. The temple was 60 cubits, or about 90 feet long. It was 20 cubits, or about 30 feet wide, and then this front part was 120 cubits, or about 180 feet tall. So it would be an imposing building, but it's not a large building.
Yeah.
I mean,
60 by 20 is what it
90 by 30
Nice.
is 2,700 square feet. Some of you live in houses that are that big. So it's not a huge building, but it is a spectacular building.
It's not as long as a basketball court, but not quite as wide.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
It's about 20,000 square foot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No,
So-
it's not. It's very cold. 27.
Huh?
I need more than that.
2,700 square feet. Did you want to say something, Bill?
Fire, and that's where the fire would never go out.
Yes, on this.
It would never go out.
Well, never go out. The priests were charged with that. All right, one final thing to think about. How was Solomon both wise and foolish?
Wise and how he led the people.
He was wise in his governing of the people, but sometimes foolish in his own personal life.
When did he start? Which accumulating the wives and the concubines. Do we know that? Is that coming up?
Apparently pretty early, it's coming up, but it's pretty early in his reign that he married the daughter of Pharaoh to cement an alliance with Egypt, and then he added others. As a matter of fact, some believe that one of Hiram's daughters was actually one of his 700 wives also. And what can we learn from him?
Marry one.
Pick the right one.
Pick the right one, not the right 700. All right, lesson 9 on Sunday, verses chapters 5 through 7. Thank you.
Well, they have-